Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. I am so excited to one, see all of your faces, two, get another opportunity to connect and work with Nancy, and three, to have a conversation about this topic because it's a pretty important one. It's been important to me. And if you've had mentors in the past or sponsors in the past, you understand the importance. And if you haven't, hopefully you'll understand the importance by the time we're finished this discussion. So with me today, I have Nancy McCray, a wonderful, kind, just strong, balanced, smart, perfect person. Somebody's applauding. Anissa's applauding. Just a wonderful individual, human being. Has been a great resource to a lot of people. And so I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you what she wants you to know about her. But I think she's amazing. So, Nancy, you want to hop on?
And this is why a village is so important. They can just prop you up no matter what. But thank you so much. Honestly, when Lisa asked my thoughts on joining her in such a discussion, I didn't even hesitate. Just really, really excited for the opportunity. The topic itself is one I've got a lot of passion about. So someone will have to probably give me the umbrella, right? The little hook every now and then. Because I'll just get on my soapbox and it'll be tough to stop because it's so important. I've been fortunate enough to have a long career in executive leadership, and having worked my way up to that point, I had a lot of help along the way. And I've always been conscious of the fact that I needed to make sure I was leaving that door open for others as well, right? So if a door is open for you, you don't slam it behind you. I think our Michelle Obama said that. You leave it open for the next person to come through. And I try really hard to live that principle. So being a mentor is one of the best privileges that I have, having, had some professional success in my life. And so I'm passionate about a number of things, but engagement, team member engagement, how we all feel about our work environments is one of the things I'm passionate about. Genuine leadership. I added that tag genuine some years ago because there's a difference between leadership and genuine leadership, and the ability to show up as who you are and create an environment where others can show up as they are is really, really important and drives that engagement. And then just developing others. Those are the things that I'm really passionate about. So of course, mentorship, sponsorship, all fall into that. But I am just blessed and excited to be here with all of you today.
Well, thank you. And so we're going to get started with the Q&A. This is really an informal format. It's a discussion. So please do ask questions. I have a set of questions for Nancy that I thought through based on the opportunities I've had to go out and speak on this topic. They're the same questions sort of creep up. But if you have something you want to know about either relationship, please do chime in, and I'll do my best to monitor the chat box. There is a little a chat feature, and so I'll turn that on and make sure that I can take a look at that. So, Nancy, let's get started by level setting. Because in your post, when you shared this event, you said there really is a difference. Mentorship isn't sponsorship, and people don't know what the difference is. So would you mind giving us your perspective on the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely, because there is a distinct difference. So a mentor is someone who is there for you, sharing their knowledge, giving you guidance, providing feedback for you, may even include some aspects of coaching, right? They're really there to help you develop, to gain confidence, to help you show up at your best. A sponsor opens doors for you, right? So a sponsor, when you're showing up at your best, they're the ones who open a door. They make introductions for you. They call a hiring manager and say, hey, I've got someone you should talk to, right? Because she's a really great candidate And, you know, I want to make sure that the resume doesn't get buried in the pile. A sponsor is there getting you into rooms that you might not have access to otherwise. And so it's not to say that a mentor might not do those things for you as well, but that's not really the role of a mentor. So you might get really lucky and find someone who fills both of those roles. I would tell you, you need to be very specific and think through who are your mentors and who are your sponsors. If you get a twofer, as one of my old bosses used to say, then that's a bonus, but keep those roles separate. And when you go to that person who may be playing both of those roles, know which hat you're asking them to wear at that time, because a sponsor is really much more active about getting you seen, and like I said, opening doors elsewhere, where a mentor is going to be a private conversation, helping you think through situations, maybe reviewing, you know, materials you've put together or presentations, or giving you other feedback on how you show up. So that, in my opinion, is kind of the distinct difference between the two.
Yeah, you said something about knowing which hat. So is it possible that I know who my sponsor is?
It is. It should be. Now, you may have sponsors that you don't realize, but that's, again, a bonus, and I wouldn't be too focused on that. I'd be trying to identify. And in some cases, depending on the relationship, you might just ask, you know, and we were talking about how strong of a tool LinkedIn is. Like, yeah. LinkedIn is a really strong tool for connecting with other folks and building relationships. Think about what you need, right? What do you need in your life at the moment? And then identify folks. Now, it's easier, I would say, to ask someone to be your mentor and give you feedback, because sponsorship, that's a whole different level of commitment. You're asking them to put their word on the line on your behalf, right? So you can't just walk up to anyone. Well, you could, but I'm not sure it'll be a favorable response. You can walk up to anyone you want, but you can't reasonably just ask anyone to be your sponsor, right? You need to be a proven asset in their eyes. And so think about that relationship and how you're building that. So you may target someone to be your sponsor, but you got to think about, how do they see you in action? Because a sponsor is someone that has seen you in action, that knows what you can do, and would feel confident putting their reputation on the line to say, hey, I would endorse Lisa, and for these reasons. Because when that turns into a job opportunity for Lisa or a project opportunity for Lisa, you don't want that person coming back and going, you said she could do this, right? And she's really not delivering. So just think about how you show up for that sponsor so they can show up for you.
That leads me to think, you know, a lot of folks ask, and remember, folks, you don't have to do the chat. You can unmute yourself and hop in and ask questions. When you are or an executive gonna sponsor someone, what do you see in that person? What makes you say, because you said you're putting your name on the line, mm-hmm. You know, that's somebody I think I could put my stamp on. That's somebody I'd be interested in speaking up for in meetings and so forth.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all the things that if you were hiring someone, what are those things you're looking at, right? What I do is I put myself in the place of the person I might be recommending them to, right? And do they have also, let's say it's a job, because sponsorship could be for a number of things, but job search is one of them, right? And you might be looking for me to connect you with a hiring manager and speak on your behalf, you know, that you would be a good fit. Well, then of course I'm going to be looking for, is that true? In my opinion, do I think that you indeed can do the job? Do you have the work ethic, the spark, the intention to bring your best, right? Do you have the skill set and the tool set? And then, you know, what should happen is a sponsor, if they can't sponsor you for whatever that happens to be, they should give you that feedback. That doesn't always happen, but ideally I'd say, you know, Lisa, I can't recommend you for that position right this moment, because, you know, I'm going to say public speaking, but that's absolutely not appropriate for you as an example. But your public speaking skills need some honing, right? Let me give you some suggestions on how you might go about, you know, strengthening that so that I can sponsor you next time. So again, it's really intentional, but asking someone to be your sponsor is asking a big task, right? In my opinion. And so you got to make sure that you're bringing it. You're bringing your A game. When
So
you see them.
Is that any different than what you're looking for when you say yes to mentoring someone? Because I know you got asked a lot. So how do you kind of decide, you know?
Can I tell you, I have never said no to someone who's asked me to mentor them.
No kidding.
I have never said no, because I can't. If you see something in me that says you think I can help you, then it is my obligation. It is my responsibility to help you with that. Like I said, I didn't get, you know, the titles behind my name on my own. Heaven knows there was a lot of grace involved. There was a lot of guidance, a lot of mentoring. And so anyone who asks me for, you know, for a relationship like that, I'm going to do what I can. Now, some of those last longer than others, right? So I've never said no, but maybe they were 2 sessions instead of ongoing, you know, monthly sessions, right? So I don't want to sound like some, you know, I've got some halo on my head, but I at least will jump in and try. And so for mentoring, that's much easier, because really it's not about my reputation at that point. I don't have any personal skin in the game, if you will, by taking on a mentoring relationship. All I'm doing is giving you the gift of time and, you know, whatever wisdom I have, right? That's very different than, you know, going out publicly and sponsoring you. Does that make sense?
Yep. So then if I am looking, because you mentioned something, you know, a person would see in you, can you talk a little bit about what we should look for in a mentor? Those of us who may not have had to approach anyone for mentoring or sponsorship, you know, what are the characteristics the mentor or the sponsor should possess?
I think that depends on what you need. So you first have to do some self-assessment, right? You got to think about, what do you need? And so that might be based on feedback you've gotten from your leader, right? In performance evaluations or coaching sessions that you've had. That might be in how you feel when you've had a project and how, you know, you've handled that. So I think what you're looking for in a mentor has to fill a need for yourself. So you may have a really tough relationship with your manager, and you need a mentor who's good at relationships, who's good at managing their emotions, because some of those things can be really emotional and really tough, right? And it's hard to step outside of that tough relationship. And so you might need someone who brings you a different perspective. And so then you're looking for a mentor who seems to have a good network, have a good relationship with others, knows how to build those bridges, and you might be asking for that. If you really struggle with presenting, right, and you know you've got a big project coming up, well, then you're going to look for a mentor who has those. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? So you're really looking for a mentor that has the strengths and the skills that you're trying to develop. And so you may have 5 mentors, right? And maybe not all at the same time, depending on where you are in your time of life and what you need at that moment.
It's a good point, because I've had several at one time. So it's a fair point to call out that you can have more than one mentor. Absolutely. Looks like Tamika has a question. If you unmute yourself.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Tamika. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am fabulous.
Good. Thank you, Lisa, for pulling this together. And of course, Nancy, thanks for being here. My question is, a lot of times when we think about mentors, we think about people who resemble us or people who we may be able to relate to. is it a best practice to advise you to go outside of your comfort zone when trying to look for a mentor, for someone who can maybe challenge you in different ways, or maybe not find a female because you're a female, but go in a different direction?
Yes.
Would you be able to expound on that a little bit?
I can. Thank you, because that was one of the things I wanted to make sure that we got into this room today, because you really need a diverse, group of support. So mentors, sponsors, advocates, whatever you want to, that personal board of directors that you need, the people, you need people that will hold up a mirror for you. My friend Paula Rock always says, sometimes people need a mirror held up and force you to look in it, right? And that person to hold up that mirror for you isn't always going to look like you, think like you, act like you. And it's actually really important that they don't, because you need that perspective, right? So especially in this day and age, right? So that's a critical piece. Probably more so for mentorship than sponsorship. Sponsorship is more about position and access to rooms and people that you might need, although there's some diversity in that as well. But truly for mentorship, those who are helping you to grow and develop and meet your goals, you need different perspectives, and someone who's going to tell you that lands on me this way, right? Or when you walk into a room, like this, that feels different, where I may have the exact same approach as you, and so that I'm not going to be able to give you that perspective. So, there's an exercise where you just kind of list out those who give you feedback, mentors, friends, family, close colleagues, and then you start kind of putting together a matrix, right? What's the sex? What's the race? What's the sexual orientation? What are, religion? Just an exercise for yourself, and start checking those boxes. And what does that support group you've built look like? And if you don't have anyone that's outside of your race, or you don't have gender diversity, right? Then that's a problem, because you're missing that perspective. Yep, it's a great point. Thanks,
How
Tamika.
about the diversity of experience, and maybe more specifically, I know that I used to think of mentors in the space I'm in. So if I'm in this group, then I want to find somebody in this group. Or if I'm at this organization, I want to find someone in that organization. Well,
Yeah.
what about if I'm in this organization and you're in that one?
No.
What's your perspective?
It is. That's equally as important, as is just physical geography, right? Because the environment, the climate is different in Charlotte than it is here in Phoenix, Arizona. And the more that we move into this global world, right? Especially now with us all connecting this way, I'm not limited to who I connect with. Because these boxes could be filled with people from all over. So you need that, that perspective. So that's really important, business line, and quite frankly, even industry, right? Yeah. So it's good to get outside of your own industry and get some view of how the rest of the world lives. The last thing I'd say about that is you got to keep that list fresh. So this is something that I did not do a great job of in my career. My mentors, and let's add age, I'm going to touch on age here as well, because if you don't have some mentors who are younger than you, you got some work to do there, right? But my mentors were always older than me, which, is natural, that, right? You're looking for that. But then as they started to retire and they started to move on, I didn't replenish, right? And then you find yourself in a situation where you're like, wait a minute, I can't call on that person the way that I used to, and I don't have that perspective now. So that's really important that you are, looking. If you got to put a reminder in your calendar for, quarterly or every other month to kind of think about what you need, and then look at your mentors and who do you still have on your speed dial, then do that. But you should also be thinking about the age of your relationships. And I would tell you, especially for those of us that are Gen X or older, we need to have some advisors on our team that are of that younger generation.
Yeah, good point. Any questions from the group? I want to be sure I am. Timothy. Timothy has a question.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Tim.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. So,
No worries.
just for an example, like SHRM, it's the Society of Human Resource Management. Are there like any kind of, I guess trade associations or organizations that really, focus on mentoring, separately, and also sponsorship separately? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does. I don't know that I know the answer to that, Lisa. Do you?
There is a organization in, I want to say Minnesota, Mentium, M-E-N-T-I-I-U-M.
Yeah, you're right, Lisa. It's Mentium.
Is it Mentium?
Yep.
That's the only organization that I'm aware of that is solely focused on mentoring. That is what they do.
Mm-hmm. So you said that was M-E-N-T-I-I-U-M, or is it two U's or two I's?
I think it's, if anybody can Google, I think it's two
Okay,
I's.
yeah, that's fine. I can look at it.
Eyes, Timothy. And then one other one comes up for me is SCORE, like keeping score at a game.
Mm-hmm.
These are volunteer mentors. Now, those mentors, from my understanding, that organization is designed for people who are interested in going out and they're business owners, entrepreneurs, starting businesses and such, and kind of it's a new space for you. And you need additional skill sets or someone else to help guide you through the process. SCORE is another mentoring group, but again, it focuses on entrepreneurs from my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two.
So is there anything for sponsorships or being a sponsor?
Nope.
Okay.
See, I think sponsorship is so personal that, and I don't know, it might exist, Tim, but sponsorship is so personal because, again, you're asking someone to, someone's got to know you. They've got to know what you can do, what you're capable of, and have confidence in your abilities to be your sponsor, right? So it would be kind of difficult. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but it'd be a little difficult to have an organization like that would, it's one thing to know what a mentee needs and align them with a mentor that can help them with that. It's another to build that relationship and have someone see you and be comfortable with you enough to then go sponsor you. So sponsorship is a much more personal thing. Strangers can be mentors and mentees and start to build that relationship and have immediate impact. Sponsors, it's just much more complicated, much more personal.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a sponsor is kind of very similar to a reference, pretty much, right? Kind of like a reference.
It is. It is, although I'd say they might be a bit more active, right? So having my name and number on the bottom of your resume, someone can call and say, would you recommend Tim? Absolutely. And here's why. That's a minimal commitment. Sponsorship, I'm actually going to go have a conversation with Ginny, right, who I know well, and say, Ginny, I need you to know this gentleman named Tim Ball, right? Here's what he can do. I know you've got some opportunities in your organization that are coming up, and I want you to think about him for future opportunities. That's a much more active role as opposed to a reference that is a bit more passive.
Okay.
That makes sense?
It does. That's good.
Okay.
So as we're, going down this path of mentorship, let's say, and you have identified an individual that you're really interested in working with them and having them mentor you. What do I need to bring to the table? What should I have ready? What kind of conversation should I be ready to have? What are they going to be looking for? I know my mentors, if, well, what do you want to work on? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? So how do you get prepared, I guess? So it's not a time waster for anybody.
Yeah. And that's really important, right? Because your mentor is probably busy, got a lot of things, they're investing in you. And so you want to maximize the time that you've got with them. And so it really goes back to that self-assessment I talked about earlier. You need to know what you need, right? This is your development and this is your opportunity to get a step up on whatever that development is. So you really need to spend some time in reflection and in consideration ahead of time to say, what is it that I want from this relationship? And again, you may have one relationship that's helping you with presentations in public, preparing for public speaking. You may have a different mentor for dealing with, organizational savvy kind of things, right? So know what you need out of that relationship and come forward with a plan. I think the best mentoring relationships that I've been in, whether I was the mentee or the mentor, was when the mentee took complete control of the conversation, because your mentor is not going to be able to guide you where you need to go if you haven't told them where you need or want to go. So you've got to be crystal clear on what you want and then show up with each meeting. So if you've got 30 minutes with them once a month, that's 30 minutes of gold, right? So show up with what you want to talk about today. Today, I want to talk about your time management skills. I'm overwhelmed with my task list. I've got notes and Post-its all over my office, and I'm just not doing a good job of keeping things together. Tell me about what you do to manage all the demands. How do you prioritize? Whatever that is, be really specific with what you're looking for. And most times I think you'll find they'll open up and gladly share with you. But you want specifics. You don't want theory. You can go get theory out of any, Google search or library book or, whatever. You want practical, solid advice. And if it's, hey, you were in the audience when I was on the stage last week, could you give me some real feedback? How did I show up? Were you, comfortable with, my language? Did you hear hesitation in my voice as I hesitate? Did you, was I using a lot of fillers, and, be very specific in the feedback that you want, and you're much more likely to get it.
One thing that's coming up for me, looking at Jenny. Jenny and I were peers once upon a time, and she was also a mentor to me, but informally. So I never went to Jenny and said, hey, would you mentor me? Would you walk me through? Would you help me develop? This is my goal. But she was in the organization I was in. She knew the people I needed to know. And she was a key player in my role. So by default, I built a relationship, not just with Jenny, but since she's on the call, I built a relationship with Jenny, and she would learn. I remember a tour, Jenny, we took of some place, somewhere in where's the strength? Where's Larry? Nebraska. No, Omaha. Yeah, we were in home, and we were touring this building, and I remember her walking me through and saying, now see, that is a such and such machine, and this is what it does, and this is why they're doing this, and this is how they're doing that. Never with me prompting. And so I just think it's important to remember that it doesn't have to always be formal. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, Nancy. It can be informal. Learning is learning, right? And she was willing, although she never said the words, I'm willing to mentor you. She was obviously doing it by showing me the ropes.
Because Jenny's a natural developer, right? So Jenny has mentored me for many, many years. So she is a natural developer. And there are some, Jenny, is developer in your top 5 in your Strengths Finders? Do you know?
It is. Yeah.
Okay, see, there you go. So there are some that just naturally, they are vested. They get energy by helping others rise. Jenny is one of those. I'm told I'm one of those. I do have developer in my top 5. And I really, when we first got, and for those of you who haven't done Strength Finders, right, it's just a tool that is done by Gallup that allows you to identify what your top 5 strengths are. And you answer these random questions, and then they come back with, like, you on paper, and you're like, how in the world did those questions relate? But developer is in my top 5, and it's the one that when I took that survey, it really didn't resonate with me. I didn't see it in myself. But then, as years have gone on, I really do. I get a charge, which is why I've never said no to anyone who's asked me for time in terms of mentoring, because I feel obligated, because I've been so blessed and so many people have taken an interest in helping me that I feel like I need to pay that forward. But you'll see that you can pick out those who are natural developers. And it's really important because they're the caretakers. With my current peers, I'm called Mama Nancy because I'm just mothering folks, right? So I guess I'm at that age now, right? That I'm just going to embrace it. Old age has hit. It's fine. It's fine. The grays are in there. So, but it took me a long time to embrace that. But I do. I love that. And you can see it in others. And what I'd say for this entire group is, whether that's your natural tendency or not, just think about how you can give someone a little nugget here and there, whether it's walking through a building tour and explaining the nuances of this organization, right, or the tools that they use, or you see someone who's quiet in a meeting, they don't speak up, help them find their voice. Those little things matter so much. The biggest accolades I get are from the things that I haven't even thought were impactful.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll pause again. Questions from the group before we keep going?
Can I ask a question, Lisa?
Yeah.
I just want to say hello to Nancy.
Mr. Doug, you look so good.
Bless you. You're so kind. Please pardon my COVID hairdo.
No, we all got COVID hair. It's all good.
But I appreciate correspondence you sent me when I had 6 years back, and I still treasure that. So I'm very appreciative of you reaching out like that. But my question really is about, like, in my position being in audit, I have I have to maintain a professional kind of distance, if you will, even though I, appreciate some of the folks I work with and look up to them, like yourself, like Larry Conyers and those folks who I've known for years. But I don't, want to get into a point where it's possible conflict of interest. So if there was somebody else in that kind of position, how would you advise them about being able to seek out, some level of mentorship, or what are alternate avenues that they may be able to find a mentor?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great question and a great call out, right? Because you don't ever want anything that might be perceived as a conflict of interest or something, but your development and your growth is critical and important too, right? Even though you're in audit, we're all going to forgive you for that, right? But your growth and your development is important. So if there's a way to build a relationship with someone that is in a group that you would never audit, that'd be my first guidance, right? Like, let's, use your existing connections to say, hey, could you introduce me to someone over in this organization that I could build a relationship with and ask for a mentoring relationship. But if that weren't possible, so someone who is your, client on the other end, depending on what your development need is. So if your development need is something that's not related to my business, yes, you're going to come in and audit my business. But if you're really looking to develop in, public speaking, then we can have that relationship. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not to say you can't ever look an auditor in an eye and don't make eye contact and don't ever be nice to them. That's not okay, or that's not even expected. So I think, you would definitely want to be careful and be thinking about whether it's appropriate, or if at any point, if you were looking for advice on organizing your audits or giving, feedback, right? Giving appropriate feedback, well, then maybe I, as your client, would not be the best mentor for that, because someone could think that I was swaying my results, right? So we want to steer clear of anything that might look like, whether it is or not, look like an ethical issue. But depending on what you're needing out of the mentoring relationship, I think those that you work with, that's not a bad thing for them, because they're going to see you in action also and be able to give you some feedback and hold up that mirror that we talked about. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much.
All right.
I hear feedback. I hear that word, is, trending throughout what you're saying. That is one of the most valuable components of mentorship, as far as I'm concerned. Understanding how people experience me, understanding how I might show up, how I could show up differently or better. What are some other really, and anybody please answer, other benefits that resonate with you when it comes to mentoring? What else can the mentor or the mentee get out of the deal?
Hey, so Lisa, this is Ginny. I was thinking about, as Nancy was talking about, almost the opposite of that, where I've had the experience in the past where you got assigned a mentor that really didn't want the job, right? So, you think about that experience and, it's really a struggle as the mentee when someone is checking a box. So what I think about is ensuring that, you as the mentee, you have every right to expect that someone has the same level of commitment that you do. And I think it's okay if somebody doesn't, to say, you know what, I think this is maybe not a good fit. And that's hard to do. Honestly, it's hard to do, but that can be it's a painful experience when you really have someone who just honestly just either A, doesn't have the time, or B, really it's not in their wheelhouse.
That's a really, really good one, Jenny. Thanks for that call out.
And I would say that there has to be a connection, right? So remember at the beginning, I said I was passionate about genuine leadership. That word genuine is so important in mentoring as well as in sponsorship or anything else you want to say. But if the connection isn't there, call it and move on, right? You might be able to build that connection, so you decide how much you want to invest in that. But if the mentor is not genuine, you're not going to get the best out of it, right? And they're not invested. So you need someone who's invested. And so back to the diversity, you need folks who know you and can see you, so they can hold up that mirror and be that feedback vessel for you. But then you also, need some folks who don't see you on a daily basis who can give you that different perspective.
Yeah. That's Jenny, that's a good one.
It is good.
The diversity piece is a good one. One of my first mentors in the corporate environment, when I moved into that corporate space, was a white guy from Kentucky. And I actually applied for a job. He was the hiring manager, and I didn't get the job. And he offered feedback. He offered feedback over coffee. And I mean, it just went from there. It was a very natural progression, and I learned a ton, and he would probably say the same. He learned a ton from me as well. And so that diversity is important. And
mentors, and Lisa, let me just add to that, because the mentors learn as well, right? So this is not a one-way relationship by any stretch of the matter, right? So I've had mentees that have been in a different business line than I was, and I've learned a ton just about how you can even have cultural differences within the same broader organization, right? Things that I would not have had view to or privy to. You certainly get to know the organization more broadly. If you have mentees out of out of your organization that are in other industries. You learn so much regardless. And again, you kind of see the world through their eyes, so you get a broader perspective as well.
Yep. Timothy's got a hand raised.
Hi, Tim.
You're on mute.
I keep on doing that. I should know better. I have a little bit of experience using this, but you know, I think Nancy mentioned it earlier about people who kind of get into retirement age and gets to a point where they can't really. But that was the one thing I was wondering about too, is tapping into that population, because you know they might be in a situation where their kids are grown up and gone, and even grandkids have their own lives, and they might be retired, but they still have all this knowledge that they can use maybe to help someone else. And you know, I know retirement life, people are glad they don't have to go to work and hustle and bustle, but then it gets to a point, what do you do? Just watch TV all day? Or like, you know, usually they volunteer and do things to keep themselves busy, or maybe they have to watch the grandkids or something. I don't know, but it seems like that population would have more time, you know, to possibly mentor and help people, especially with all that knowledge that they have. But some of it could be, you know, maybe technology has kind of moved on with certain things, possibly, but
yeah.
you know,
Well, I think though so there's a couple of things that come to mind for me there, Tim. One is depending on the person, right? And whether they're willing post-retirement to continue that relationship. They very well may be, maybe not at the same frequency, maybe on as needed. That's not to say that just because they retired, you know, they've got nothing else to give. So that's a really good call out. And I have a prior leader that I love with all my heart. And he retired, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. I haven't called on him often, but I have called on him a couple of times, and he has answered the call and been amazing to help me think through some things. So that's absolutely appropriate. The thing I would say, though, in terms of ongoing, so I've called on him when I had something very specific that I knew he could give me some perspective on. But now he's been out of the workforce for 3 years, right? He doesn't know the environment that I'm living in anymore. And so what I call on him for is very different than what I might have called on him for 3 years ago, right? Because as you move away and into retirement, one, I just feel like I shouldn't bug him too much, because whether it's fishing or watching Price is Right, whatever he's happened to be doing, I feel like I should minimize how often I knock on his door. But also his perspective is now different, right? Very, very different. So again, it goes back to, what do you need? What's your purpose right this moment? What's your development need? And absolutely, maybe one of those prior mentors that's now retired is the right resource. You just got to be specific. It's really in the prep of what you need, and then who's the best fit for that.
Any other questions out there? So I have another one.
All right.
I don't know if anybody on the call watched the Michelle Obama documentary. You did? So I see a hand. There is one scene where she's talking about exiting the White House, and I remember her saying she got on the plane and she sat down and she cried for 30 minutes. And the crying for 30 minutes was about the relief of all the pressure she felt to be perfect. And, you know, just this expectation, I guess, you know, the first Black first lady and so forth. And so it was just a sigh of relief. And so you were one of the few women of color in the organization, at least when I was there and in that space. Was there this, did you carry this pressure around mentoring others because people who look like you might be attracted to you? Not just those people of color, but especially those people of color. They see another woman of color and they say, oh, geez, I need to I need her. You know, I certainly did. I'll admit it. I certainly did. And I had a diverse set of mentors, but one of the attractions were you were a woman, you were in my organization, and you were a person of color.
Yeah.
So
it didn't carry for me, or I don't carry it. I shouldn't speak past tense. I don't carry it as any kind of weight because I'm energized by it, right? So again, I've got developer in my top 5. So it's fuel for me. Like there's something about being needed and appreciated that just then, okay, I can do this and I'm ready for the next thing, right? So for me, there wasn't that burden or that weight at all, because each interaction, now it didn't mean that I wouldn't look at my calendar on any given day that was back to back to back and be like, oh my gracious, right? There's just no time to get something done. But when I got in the moment and started having the dialogue, I'm energized. Just like right here, I'm ready to go. Come on, let's go tackle the world's problems. Let's go do it, right? Because I feed off of the energy of the other person, and I do feel like I get as much as
nice.
I give.
Yeah. Nice. How did you create that balance when you talked about your calendar being full? I mean, you were in an executive role, so you know you had a lot going on, I'm sure.
I did, and I probably am not the best role model because I end up then just spreading out the day or working late or working early. And so, you know, so I'm sitting in my home office right now. So I'm blessed to have a separate space in my home that allows me to work, but it can be a curse as well, right? Because if I'm up early, and I'm normally the one that's up early before the family gets up. And so I go ahead and creep downstairs, and then I'm in here. Oh, let me get a couple things off the to-do list, right? But I'm a list maker. I got lists all around me. Actually, if you could, I'm not moving the camera, but if you could see right here, you'd be like, good gracious, right? What is all that? But I'm a list maker. And so I make my list, and then I just figure out, okay, what can I reasonably tackle today? And if I can get a couple more done, then that's great. Sometimes that's early morning when it's quiet in the house. Sometimes it's late night. And sometimes some things don't get done, right? So have you ever heard the analogy of the glass ball and the rubber ball? You know, we're all juggling, right? We're all juggling a million things. And you got to know which of those things are glass balls and which are rubber, right? So the glass balls, you got to keep them up. You can't let them drop. Those rubber balls, they can drop. They'll drop a couple times. And some of them, they'll drop till they stop. And no one even realizes it didn't get done because it really wasn't top priority. So I try to keep that in mind when I start to get overwhelmed because the to-do list is this long. Okay, which of these are rubber? And maybe they can't bounce forever, but they can bounce a time or two before I put them back in the mix. And so that priority is important. And it's crazy important right now while we're all at home.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to come in here, stay in here, right? And lose track of time.
Tamika's got a hand raised.
Hi, Miss Tamika.
Quick question. Now that you just mentioned it, we're in this virtual environment. Are there any reading material, books or magazines or any kind of studies, not necessarily studies, but anything that we can use maybe on the mentor side or the mentee side that you might recommend that have really resonated with you in your relationships? Mentor relationships?
Save me, Lisa. I'm like looking back at the cabinet.
Well, while you're thinking, Nancy, this isn't a book, but when Nancy mentioned Strength Finders, I do think it's a really good idea to take some form of personality assessment. Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, Berkman. I mean, they've just got
Personalysis, yeah,
just a ton of them out here. Emotional intelligence. There's just a ton of these assessments. I think they fly under the radar. but they tell us so much about ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the things, because I'm in the coaching space, one of the things I like to do is have that's data, that you have that information. You could have that information and take it to your mentor and say, you know, my assessment says this about me. I find this to be true, and I want to learn how to do X or Y, or that it can just give them insight. Even, but it's not a book. Of course, a lot of those assessments come with reading. Like StrengthsFinders has a book 2.0, Emotional Intelligence. There are tons of books out there. I do think those assessments are pretty critical, actually, to help you understand who you are and how you show up in the world and in the workplace.
Yeah. And honestly, Tamika, the reason I hesitated, because I don't know, I actually have a book up in the cabinet that I've never opened that is about mentorship that I got as a gift for being part of a formal mentoring program. But the books that I read are typically leadership books or self-help, so I have 2 books up there about StrengthsFinders that I refer to quite often when I'm working with someone in a coaching capacity. And responsibility is another one of my strengths, right? I just, and you heard that when I said I'd never said no to someone who asked for help, because I feel responsible for that. Now, again, that can be a curse depending on what you're dealing with. But, I had someone I was coaching that had the responsibility strength, and their manager had the responsibility strength. And what I learned in that reading, which makes perfect sense, is that's when a manager feels like they're micromanaging, because I'm reporting to you. You feel responsible for whatever the task is. I feel responsible for whatever the task. You're checking in on me all the time. Is it, are you done? Are you done? How's it going? Can I see it? What are we, because you have that responsibility, gene as well. And as the person who's the subordinate, it feels overwhelming because I've got it. It's mine. Don't you worry, right? I've got it. So those kind of assessments are good in terms of knowing what you need, and then being able to have the dialogue with someone that says, listen, I need you. So I have a perfect example. I hope she won't hate me for sharing it because she's not on this call, but Gail Turpening is the name you all probably know. She was my right hand in my last role, and she would, schedule leadership meetings and conferences and these huge things. And we had the very first one when she and I started working together. We had little gifts for people at the end of the conference, and we'd had dinner and people were milling, and I started grabbing the bags and giving them to people. Gail was horrified because she felt like she'd failed because she hadn't gotten people their, parting gifts fast enough. And I was like, what is your problem? I can hand out gifts. It wasn't a big deal, right? But I learned in that moment, you have to understand where others are in their space, because actions that you'd take as a leader that really were harmless, or you thought they were harmless, really could do a lot of harm. Thankfully, Gail and I had a solid enough relationship that she explained how that felt. And I think she has responsibility in her top 5. So in that case, I was the one looking like or acting like the micromanager, and I needed to take a step back. So that's the kind of stuff I read in, is more in personal relationships and that kind of development stuff. I haven't done a lot of reading specifically on mentoring, because for me, mentoring is just what we're doing here, having a conversation and helping someone through whatever they're going through.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, more so in your relationships. Had there been any good reading material that you come across, not necessarily on mentorship, but while you were in those mentoring relationships? But you answered my question.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Tamika, I have a recommendation for a book. It's called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor.
That's good.
And it's by Sylvia Hewitt.
That's the book that's in my cabinet that I haven't read. So clearly I need to pull it out.
Nancy, come on, let's go.
Thank you,
I
Jenny.
clearly need to pull it out and
I
make
haven't
that
read
happen.
that, Jenny, but
Yeah.
she has done a lot of research.
Yeah.
She's the CEO of the Center of Talent
Yeah.
and Innovation. She's
Yeah.
done a lot of research in that sponsorship space.
Yeah, so it's a good one. I think it's worth a read.
Yeah. There's one called Growth Mindset. Growth Mindset. Carol DeWick. Carol DeWick or Carolyn DeWick. It's Growth Mindset. And then I am currently reading The Year of Yes, Shonda Rhimes.
Oh,
Love
I've
that.
heard good things. Yes.
Good one.
Are you in your pose? You stand in your pose?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, we are just about at the top of the hour. Feel like I'm in the church. Are all hearts clear? Is there anything?
I just know Tamika's not going to be reading nothing. She really wants to know what's in your Netflix channel.
See, Doug, I was trying to be good. I was, but you had to ruin it.
Just honesty and authenticity.
That's right. Genuine. That's it.
Genuine.
That's it.
So any final questions, comments?
Yes, I have one. Hi, this is Rhonda. How would you say, in terms of overcoming or dealing with perception from a sponsorship perspective, how you show up, but more importantly, how others perceive you? How much weight does that carry?
Yeah, I think that depends on the weight of the sponsor, right? How much are they valued and looked up to in that organization? So if it's someone that has high credibility in the organization, then that's going to go a long way on your behalf, right? So if, I have shown up a few times, we had a conversation at one of our TMN town halls about not being able to show up as the angry Black woman, right? Even if you are the angry Black woman, you can't show up as the angry Black woman. And we had this conversation. Now, if I've slipped a few times and I've shown up that way and I haven't managed it well, then I might be able to have a sponsor who has high credibility that can walk into a room and say, listen, I know how you experienced Nancy, but let me tell you what I know about Nancy, how I've experienced her. And although she allowed her emotions to get in the way in this case, I need you to give her another opportunity. And then of course it's on Nancy to show up really well going forward, right? So I would say, to answer your question specifically, that really depends on the credibility level of the sponsor.
That is a great question. Thank you, Rhonda, for asking.
It is, because it's another great role. We didn't touch on it, but that's another great role of a sponsor. And quite frankly, we all have times we didn't show up at our best, right? And we need that grace. We need to look in the mirror and be able to adjust and make sure that we're showing up differently, but we need that grace in order to have that next opportunity. And a sponsor can be a fantastic resource in that case.
Thank you.
You bet.
Well, thank you everyone for your
Yes.
participation, your energy, your grace, because this technology thing, you need a lot of grace with it.
Oh my gosh.
Connect with each other, connect with Nancy and I, connect with each other, and keep the conversation going. If you have questions after this and you think about it, hit us up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Find us on LinkedIn, connect, and, I'll never say no. So there we go.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you
So
so
much.
much.
So good to see all of you.
Too.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank
So
you.
good to see you, Nancy.
Hi, Damon. Oh, I just want to squeeze on